Have you ever witnessed a moment in a courtroom where the balance of power shifted dramatically, almost in the blink of an eye? Picture this. A seasoned police officer, secure as authority, flashes a smug smirk at a young black woman standing in the defendant's chair. The tension in the room is palpable, everyone expecting the usual story, one of power, privilege, and vulnerability. But in a heartbeat, everything changes. The room falls silent as the woman reaches into her purse, pulling out a gleaming badge from the Department of Justice. Suddenly, the entire dynamic shifts. Power no longer lies where it once did. In that instant, the pursuit of justice becomes something real and undeniable. Talia Morgan stood outside the imposing Fulton County Courthouse in downtown Atlanta, her heart pounding in her chest. The red brick structure, crowned by a weathered copper dome, seemed almost to tower over her, as if warning her of the challenges ahead. A rush of emotion stirred within her, nervousness, apprehension, even a sharp bite of indignation, but she held herself tall, her back straight, her gaze unwavering. The soft Georgia breeze whispered through magnolia trees that lined the streets, offering her a moment of calm amidst the chaos of what was to come. At just 29, Talia had dedicated her life to two things: law enforcement and the relentless pursuit of truth. On the surface, she looked like any other young black woman stepping into court, facing the weight of allegations. But that was precisely the point. Her dark hair was neatly styled in a low bun, and she wore a sleek navy blazer over a crisp white blouse, a professional look that offered no hint of what she was truly there to do. It was camouflage, intentional and calculated, for the truth she was about to reveal. As she entered the courthouse, Talia moved to the corridor leading to courtroom number 6. The hallway hummed softly, the sound of polished shoes tapping the marble floor, and low voices of lawyers in quiet conversation. Her eyes briefly drifted to a bulletin board where the list of upcoming cases was posted. In bold letters, one case caught her eye: State of Georgia versus Talia Morgan. The official label on that sheet of paper, simple and straightforward, betrayed nothing of the complexities that lay beneath the surface. No one knew yet about the bombshell waiting to explode. As she sat on a wooden bench outside the courtroom, her gaze lingered on the intricate patterns etched into the tall double doors. She reflected on the reason she was here. On the outside, she was a defendant, but deep down, she was here to expose the truth, hidden beneath the charges laid against her. The allegations were designed to bring her to this very courthouse without raising suspicion, and few were in the loop about her true purpose. Even the judge had no idea of the larger mission at play. This was a covert operation that required the utmost secrecy. It was then that she saw him, Officer Brad Mulligan. He strolled down the hall with an air of arrogance, his cropped blonde hair and crisp uniform clearly marking him as someone with authority. As he walked, the smug smile on his lips was unmistakable, and it rattled Talia to the core. He was tall, commanding attention with every step, exuding the kind of confidence that only came from years of holding power. Behind him was Officer Miguel Reyes, his partner. Reyes appeared more reserved, his eyes darting nervously as though he sensed something was off. Talia knew exactly who Mulligan was. He was more than just an officer in the Atlanta Police Department. He was the key to this entire operation. The game was about to change, and Mulligan had no idea what was coming for him. Officer Mulligan made no attempt to conceal the disdain in his eyes when he spotted Talia waiting outside the courtroom. In that fleeting moment, Talia understood exactly what was expected of her: to feel small, powerless, and insignificant. If Mulligan's version of events prevailed, she would be just another black woman who had dared to step out of line. But what Mulligan didn't know was that the script was about to be flipped in the most dramatic way imaginable. To understand how Talia found herself in the defendant's seat that day, one had to rewind several weeks to a secretive meeting that took place inside the imposing Robert F. Kennedy Department of Justice building in Washington, D.C. The building, with its carved columns and large black doors, exuded power. Talia had sat in a secure briefing room, the lighting harsh and the decor minimal, allowing no distractions. The quiet hum of the HVAC system was the only sound breaking the stillness. Seated around the table with her were two of the most influential figures in the Department of Justice, Deputy Attorney General Marcus Whitfield, and her direct supervisor, Special Agent in Charge Regina Pierce. Marcus, with his salt and pepper hair and somber demeanor, leaned forward and fixed Talia with a gaze that radiated both urgency and trust. Regina, younger but just as formidable, had a commanding presence that made even the bravest agents shrink in her presence. "Talia," Regina said softly, tapping a manila folder on the polished table. "We've had corruption cases in Georgia that have gone nowhere for years. Evidence is destroyed or lost. Witnesses recant. It never sticks. This time, we need a different approach." Marcus cleared his throat, his voice steady as he continued. "We believe the corruption runs deep. We suspect involvement from multiple players in law enforcement and legal circles. It's possible some local judges are compromised as well. Your record is exemplary, and your infiltration skills are unmatched. We want to go undercover as a defendant in a small but highly visible case, something that Officer Mulligan can't resist exploiting." Talia's heartbeat quickened. She had done undercover work before, but never in a courtroom setting. The risk was astronomical. "So, you want to let them arrest me?" she asked, her tone measured and steady. "To gather intel and potentially identify co-conspirators from the inside?" Marcus nodded. "We've got a cover story. Mulligan has ties to certain individuals we've been monitoring. If he thinks he has an easy target, a vulnerable defendant, he might slip up, reveal what he's been doing with falsified evidence and shady testimonies." Regina's eyes hardened. "It may get ugly. You'll face real charges on paper. Some of these people won't hesitate to break every ethical rule to see you locked up. We need absolute commitment." Talia glanced from Marcus to Regina. Both were waiting for her to make a decision, to step into the firing line. She took a measured breath, the weight of the operation settling on her shoulders. "Let's do it," she said, her voice trembling just enough to show the seriousness of the choice. In that moment, she sealed her fate, forging a path that would ultimately lead her to courtroom in Atlanta, where Mulligan's smirk awaited, like a gauntlet thrown down on the polished floors. A few days after the clandestine meeting, Talia arrived in Atlanta under the guise of visiting a friend, keeping her true mission concealed. She spent her first day exploring the city, soaking in the local energy and pinpointing the main police precinct while taking mental snapshots of Mulligan's territory. The plan was simple on the surface. Talia would be caught in possession of a small amount of contraband planted by a confidential informant working with the DOJ. Mulligan, known for keeping a close eye on local bars and nightclubs for potential marks, would catch wind of her supposed wrongdoing, arrest her, and from there, the grand performance would begin. That night, Talia visited a well-known lounge, a popular spot for both locals and visitors alike. Blue Orchid was a well-known establishment in Atlanta, famous for its vibrant jazz sessions and signature cocktails. It was the kind of place Officer Mulligan frequented when hunting for easy arrests, young people too intoxicated to defend themselves or unsuspecting individuals he could easily coerce into deals. The neon lights flickered across plush chairs, while soulful tunes flowed from a small stage where the band played their hearts out. Talia sat at the bar, her sleek black dress understated enough to blend in, but enticing enough to match the type Mulligan often preyed upon. As she sipped her drink slowly, her eyes scanned the room, searching for any sign of him. It didn't take long. Mulligan entered with two fellow officers, his posture radiating confidence as his eyes swept over the crowd for potential opportunities. Talia played along, pretending to laugh at a half-hearted conversation with the bartender, her quick glances aimed at Mulligan. She didn't have to wait long before his gaze landed on her, and a slow, knowing grin spread across his face. The trap was set. Before Mulligan could approach, Talia excused herself from the bar and moved toward the restroom as instructed. Earlier that evening, the DOJ informant had discreetly slipped the contraband into her purse, ensuring Mulligan's search would yield the desired results. As soon as Talia exited the restroom and turned the corner into a dimly lit corridor, Mulligan and his partner were waiting. He grabbed her arm with a practiced move. "Excuse me, ma'am," he said, his voice dripping with feigned politeness. "I got word you might be carrying something illegal tonight. Mind if I take a quick look?" Talia feigned innocence, clutching her purse defensively, just as anyone terrified of a search would. "You must have the wrong person." Mulligan's grin widened. "We'll see about that," he muttered, his hands moving in a practiced motion. He and his partner stepped forward and opened her purse. Their flashlights illuminated a small sealed bag. Talia tensed, playing her role to perfection. She gasped dramatically, her face twisting in shock and fear, just as if she were genuinely caught off guard. Well, Mulligan murmured, holding the bag up triumphantly. Drug possession. That's a felony charge. Looks like you're coming downtown with us. The smirk never left his face, but even though Talia knew this was all a setup, she couldn't help but feel an icy chill run down her spine. The real cuffs pinched as they clicked around her wrists. Despite her DOJ training, the weight of the metal and the cold, hard reality of being arrested by Mulligan made her heart race. She had to fight the urge to reveal who she really was, to tell him exactly who he was dealing with. Instead, she bit the inside of her cheek, keeping her head lowered as Mulligan led her away from the Blue Orchid, the curious stares of onlookers following her every move. The day of her arraignment arrived swiftly, culminating in the tense scene in the courthouse hallway. Officer Mulligan and his partner stood across from her, their eyes locked onto her with the casual arrogance of men who thought they had already won. Talia could feel Mulligan's confidence swelling with each passing second. To him, this was just another day, another easy suspect who wouldn't be able to afford a decent lawyer, let alone challenge his version of events. Inside the courtroom, Judge Harriet McPherson presided over the day's docket. In her late 50s, with curly silver hair and a gaze that commanded authority, she wore her formal black robes with the kind of presence that left the gallery in respectful silence. Talia's lawyer, Josiah Brooks, a local public defender who had been secretly briefed on Talia's true role, stood beside her, offering his silent support. Mulligan was called to the stand first. His voice, laden with self-importance, recounted the night in question. He described how he had spotted suspicious activity and acted on a tip. As he spoke, Talia ground her teeth, listening to the casual fabrications he wove into his testimony for dramatic effect. He made it sound as though Talia had been stumbling around, flaunting the contraband, acting with the recklessness of someone who deserved to be arrested. Next, the evidence was presented, the small bag that had been planted in Talia's purse. Judge McPherson narrowed her eyes, her pen moving swiftly across her notepad as she scribbled notes. She looked up at Talia. Miss Morgan, she addressed her voice calm but commanding. How do you plead to the charge of possession with intent to distribute? Talia took a steady breath, knowing the weight of those words was heavy, yet sticking to the plan. Though every part of her yearned to reveal the truth, she kept her composure. Not guilty, Your Honor, she said, her voice calm but unwavering. Judge McPherson eyed her with sharp scrutiny, her gaze piercing through Talia's calm exterior. I'll set a date for a preliminary hearing in 1 week. In the meantime, Miss Morgan, you will be released on bail, provided you adhere to all conditions. Her gaze shifted to Officer Mulligan, his smug expression still hanging in the air like a shadow. Officer Mulligan, thank you for your testimony. We'll see you back here next week. With a swift strike of her gavel, the proceedings ended. The tension in the room momentarily lightened, but Talia felt Mulligan's eyes on her as she filed out of the courtroom. That smirk, there was no mistaking it. It was a look of superiority that grated on her nerves. She pressed her lips together, reminding herself that his fleeting moment of triumph would soon vanish. In the days leading up to the preliminary hearing, Talia juggled her covert work with the heavy restrictions of her bail. According to the official record, she was considered a flight risk, so she was placed under strict house arrest with a curfew. An ankle monitor was fitted on her, though, thanks to the DOJ's modifications, it allowed her the flexibility she needed to investigate while maintaining the illusion of being under lock and key. During the day, she attended attorney meetings, which were, in reality, covert meetings with local DOJ contacts. Late one evening, in the back room of a dusty law library, Talia met with her public defender, Josiah Brooks, and a special DOJ analyst named Teresa Nguyen. Teresa, a tech-savvy agent, was brought in to sift through Mulligan's phone records and financial statements. There's definitely suspicious activity, Teresa said, pulling up a tablet that displayed complex graphs. Mulligan's finances show random spikes in deposits that correspond with the dismissals of certain cases. A pattern was emerging. He's arresting individuals for minor infractions, often targeting minorities, And then those cases mysteriously vanish once payments funnel through shell accounts. Josiah shook his head in disgust. He's been taking bribes in exchange for either losing evidence or falsifying charges. It's a protection racket, and word on the street is that certain local officials might be involved. He paused, his expression hardening. The question is, who? Talia leaned in, studying the digital trail on Teresa's tablet. The amounts were significant enough to suggest a network beyond just one crooked cop. Her hands clenched into fists as she stared at the evidence. We just need to find the right moment to expose everything in court, she said. But even that might not be enough. What if the judge or the prosecution is involved? Josiah nodded grimly. It has to be airtight. If we move too soon, Mulligan could slip away. If we wait too long, he might figure out who you really are. In that dimly lit law library, illuminated only by the flickering overhead lights, Talia felt the weight of the mission settle on her shoulders. She wasn't just fighting for herself. She was fighting for every person Mulligan had wrongfully arrested, coerced, or threatened. The line between justice and injustice was razor thin, and one wrong move could bring everything crashing down. 2 nights before preliminary hearing, Talia received an unexpected phone call. The voice on the other end was scratchy and distorted. Miss Morgan, you don't know me, but I have information about Mulligan and about you. Meet me in the parking lot behind the old sports bar on Peachtree at midnight. Talia's pulse quickened. Her instinct screamed that it was a trap, but she quickly agreed. She informed Josiah and Teresa, who insisted on providing backup from a distance. Armed with concealed recorder, Talia slipped into the humid Atlanta night. The ankle monitor was safely overridden by DOJ tech to ensure it wouldn't set off any alarms. Behind the rundown bar on Peachtree Street, the asphalt was riddled with potholes, and a single flickering streetlight cast ominous shadows on the graffiti-streaked walls. Talia's nerves were on edge as she scanned the area, her senses alert. She spotted a figure in a hooded jacket stepping out from the shadows. Behind the dumpster, the figure's voice was muffled by the mask. You came alone? Talia nodded, though she lied, the words slipping out easily. Yes. What do you have? The person hesitated, eyes scanning Talia's face before rushing to speak. I work for Mulligan. He made me plant drugs on people. Folks who never did anything wrong. He got orders from higher up. Talia's heart raced. She inched closer, straining to capture every word on her hidden recorder. Who are these higher-ups? Judges? Prosecutors? Before the figure could answer, the screech of tires shattered the stillness of the night. A black SUV sped into the lot, its headlights flooding the area. Talia dug behind the rusted dumpster, adrenaline surging through her veins. 2 men leapt from the vehicle, firearms raised and ready. The informant shrieked in terror, sprinting for cover, but one of the men opened fire. The gunshot echoed in the empty lot, sending a shockwave through the silence. Talia's eyes widened in horror, but her covert training kicked in. She scrambled along the side of the dumpster, desperate to find an escape route. A bullet ricocheted off the metal beside her, spraying sparks. She pressed her back against the dumpster, her heart pounding in her throat. Then, from the darkness, a black sedan roared into view. Josiah was behind the wheel, Teresa in the passenger seat. Teresa leaned out of the window, brandishing a sidearm. Get in, she hollered urgently. Without thinking, Talia seized the moment. As more bullets whizzed by, she dashed across the lot, hurling herself into the back seat. The sedan tore away, its tires screeching, the SUV and its mysterious occupants vanishing into the night. Who the hell was that? Josiah gasped, his hands gripping the steering wheel tightly. Talia steadied her breathing, checking the hidden recorder in her jacket. The red light was still on. They're part of Mulligan's network, obviously, she said between ragged breaths. They got to our informant before we could, and whoever it was, they wanted to make sure we learned nothing. Teresa's face was grim. If Mulligan's network has watchers out tonight, they might suspect you're more than a random defendant. We need to move carefully. In the dark interior of the sedan, Talia clutched the recorder, a swirl of guilt and resolve tearing at her. She had promised to protect any whistleblowers who came forward, and she had failed. Now, The only shred of evidence she had was a frantic confession, half-finished, captured in poor audio. But it was something, and in a case like this, every shred mattered. The day of the preliminary hearing arrived with overcast skies, as if the heavens themselves were brooding over the looming confrontation. Talia stood outside the courthouse, her heart heavy with the memory of the informant's fate. She had no idea if the individual had survived or was lying injured somewhere. The guilt gnawed at her, but she also knew her role demanded composure, especially now. The hearing would set the stage for the bigger battles ahead. Inside the courtroom, Mulligan took the stand once more, recounting the same fabricated story about Talia's alleged behavior at the Blue Orchid. This time, however, he added more spice to his testimony, claiming that Talia had been openly selling illicit substances to the bar patrons. Talia forced herself to remain expressionless, though anger simmered within her. When it was Josiah's turn to cross-examine, he rose from the defense table and took measured steps toward Mulligan. "Officer Mulligan," he began, his voice smooth, "could you remind the court how you arrived at the tip that Miss Morgan was distributing narcotics that evening?" Mulligan shrugged nonchalantly. "I got a call from a reliable confidential informant. They said a woman matching Miss Morgan's description was dealing drugs." Josiah's eyebrows rose. "You're certain it was Miss Morgan's description?" "Absolutely," Mulligan replied confidently. "I recognize her easily in the club." Josiah leaned in. "Did you see any exchanges of money or goods taking place that night?" Mulligan faltered, his confidence wavering slightly. "Well, not exactly, but the informant has always been reliable, and then we found the drugs on her." Josiah nodded, feigning understanding. Sure. So, you assumed guilt based on an anonymous tip and the presence of contraband in her purse. Did you ever consider that Miss Morgan might have been framed?" Mulligan leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. "Framed? By whom? Miss Morgan is just a bar hopper. No one would bother framing her. She's nobody." A hush fell over the courtroom. Talia felt the sting of the insult, but she remained stoic. This was the moment. She glanced at Josiah, who gave her the slightest nod. They were about to test Mulligan's reaction, revealing just a sliver of truth to see how he would respond under pressure. Josiah turned back to Mulligan. "Officer, if you're so confident in this evidence, would you be willing to testify under oath that no one else in your department or beyond has a hand in targeting Miss Morgan?" Mulligan's composure flickered, a brief flicker of unease crossing his face before he quickly regained his swagger. "Of course. I swear under oath that no one else is involved. I'm just doing my job." That was when the real drama began. Josiah shot a quick glance at Talia. She rose from her seat and stepped forward. Judge McPherson's eyes darted to the unusual movement. "Miss Morgan, you'll get your chance when your attorney allows it," the judge admonished. "Your Honor," Talia said respectfully, her voice calm but filled with purpose. "I have crucial information regarding my defense and the integrity of Officer Mulligan's statements." She paused, letting the tension build. "I also have evidence of a wider network of corruption within the Atlanta Police Department." A ripple of whispers coursed through the courtroom. Even the bailiff seemed unsettled. Mulligan's eyes flicked to Talia, confusion and anger flashing across his face. Judge McPherson lifted a hand for silence, her expression stern. "Miss Morgan, that's a serious claim. If this is some kind of tactic..." Talia carefully slid her hand into her blazer pocket and produced her Department of Justice badge. The metal glinted under the courtroom's fluorescent lights. Gasps erupted across the gallery, and Mulligan's jaw dropped. For a brief moment, the courtroom fell into stunned silence. "Your Honor, my name is Talia Morgan," she said, her voice steady, honed by months of training. "I am a special investigator with the United States Department of Justice, operating undercover to investigate systemic corruption and misconduct related to Officer Mulligan's arrests. I have evidence that calls his entire testimony, and many other cases, into question." Pandemonium broke out. People in the gallery leapt to their feet, voices clamoring for clarity. Mulligan's face turned a mottled red, his bravado leaking away like air from a balloon. Judge McPherson slammed her gavel repeatedly. "Order in the court." "Order," she thundered. Once the noise subsided, she pinned Talia with an incredulous stare. Miss Morgan? Agent Morgan, what is the meaning of this? Talia raised her chin, unwavering. I have been embedded in Atlanta for the past few weeks, investigating allegations of planted evidence, bribery, and intimidation by Officer Mulligan. I can present documents and recorded statements that suggest his involvement in multiple wrongful arrests, mine being the most recent. A stunned silence followed. From the corner of her eye, Talia spotted Mulligan's partner, Officer Reyes, inching toward the door. She mentally filed that away. Flight risk. The seeds of doubt and fear were beginning to sprout. Judge McPherson's knuckles turned white around the gavel. I want Chambers. Now, the prosecution, the defense, and Miss Morgan, court is in recess. And just like that, the facade shattered. The truth was laid bare for the first time. But Talia knew that the real battle had only just begun. In the judge's private chambers, tensions crackled in the air like static before a storm. The room was modestly furnished, with dark shelves stacked high with legal tomes. A single large window looked out over the cityscape, where gray cloud hovered ominously, casting a shadow over the scene inside. Judge McPherson sat behind an imposing desk, her usually composed expression taut with shock and annoyance. To her left stood Assistant District Attorney Colleen Harris, a sharp-eyed woman in her early 40s, clearly shaken by the revelation. On Talia's side of the room, Josiah maintained his calm demeanor, while Talia stood beside him, DOJ badge in hand. Mulligan, his earlier arrogance replaced by a simmering rage, was also present, his demeanor tense. Beside him stood a departmental attorney, equally rattled by the sudden turn of events. Judge McPherson folded her hands together, her steely gaze settling on Talia. Let's get one thing straight, Agent Morgan. Were you truly arrested under false pretenses, or was this entire ordeal staged by the DOJ? Talia cleared her throat before responding. Your Honor, the arrest was real in the sense that Mulligan placed me in custody based on fabricated evidence. It was staged on our side only in that I allowed myself to be in a situation where he could do so. We had reason to believe he would plant contraband and falsify a tip, which is exactly what he did. Mulligan practically vibrated with indignation. That's a damn lie. I've never planted anything in my career. His attorney placed a calming hand on his shoulder, urging him to remain quiet. Ignoring Mulligan's outburst, Talia handed a folder to Judge McPherson. Inside were copies of financial statements, incomplete audio clips from a near-fatal meeting in the parking lot, and logs of Mulligan's phone messages. This is preliminary evidence, Your Honor, Talia continued, her voice steady. It indicates a pattern of misconduct. There's more. We're still compiling the evidence. Judge McPherson flipped through the pages, her expression darkening. How dare you disrupt my court in this manner? I should hold the DOJ in contempt for not informing me of this operation. Talia remained composed, her gaze unwavering. We had to ensure the integrity of the investigation. Your Honor, we were concerned that leaks within the system might jeopardize the operation. Mulligan's departmental attorney seized the opening. Leaking to the judge? That's an outrageous implication. Are you suggesting that Judge McPherson is compromised? Talia shook her head. No, but we have evidence that at least one individual in the local judiciary may be involved. We did not know who, so we had to keep everything confidential. Judge McPherson placed a folder down, massaging her temples. She then fixed Mulligan with a steely gaze. Officer Mulligan, what do you have to say regarding these allegations? Mulligan's lawyer stepped forward. We request an immediate dismissal of charges against Miss Morgan on the grounds of entrapment. Furthermore, we demand a separate hearing to address these allegations of corruption, which are clearly unsubstantiated. Assistant District Attorney Harris finally spoke, her voice trembling with contained anger. Your Honor, if the DOJ's allegations hold any water, it means that Mulligan's arrest record and potentially other officers' conduct could be compromised. We need a full inquiry. Judge McPherson let out a slow exhale, the weight of a situation sinking in. This is going to be a legal circus. For now, I'm dismissing the charges against Miss Morgan. I'll schedule a special hearing to examine this evidence. Until then, Officer Mulligan, you are suspended for making further arrests in this matter. Both sides are present all relevant information within 72 hours. The gavel that Judge McPherson picked up from her desk wasn't slammed, but the tension in her grip was palpable. "Court is adjourned," she said, her tone cold and final. The revelation set off shockwaves throughout the Atlanta community. Local news outlets quickly latched onto the sensational story. Undercover DOJ agent poses as defendant, accuses APD officer corruption. Talia's face appeared on every major channel. Though her identity as an undercover agent sparked both outrage and curiosity, it was a story that divided opinions. Some hailed her as a hero, exposing corruption in law enforcement. Others doubted her motives, calling the operation a deceitful entrapment. The city buzzed with conversation, torn between those who believed in Talia's integrity and those who questioned the methods used to uncover the truth. Speculation ran rampant. How far did corruption go at the DOJ field office in Atlanta? Talia met with her superiors, who had flown in after the story broke wide open. Deputy Attorney General Marcus Whitfield strode into the conference room, the lines of fatigue marking his face. "This operation became public sooner than we wanted," he said, a deep frown creasing his forehead. "But we can still salvage this. Tell me you have enough evidence to make a solid case." Talia nodded, though her confidence was tempered by the memory of the parking lot shooting that had nearly cost them their informant. "We have documents and partial recordings. We also have a trail of suspicious financial transactions. Teresa Nguyen is analyzing them as we speak." She paused, biting her lip. "The missing link is live testimony. Someone from inside Mulligan's circle who can confirm everything." Regina Pierce, Talia's direct supervisor, folded her arms, a stern expression on her face. "The problem is that your potential informant disappeared. We don't know if they're dead, injured, or simply in hiding." Talia's shoulders slumped as she recalled the fear she had seen in the anonymous figure's eyes. "If only we could find them," she murmured. Marcus exhaled deeply. "Without a whistleblower who can name names, we're stuck in a cycle of circumstantial evidence and conspiracy theories. Mulligan might walk away clean, and so might anyone else involved." The conversation stretched on for hours, each minute weighed down by the growing sense of urgency. By the end, the DOJ strategy became clear. They would present what they had in the special hearing, hoping it would pressure individuals to talk. But Talia couldn't shake the feeling that Mulligan had an ace up his sleeve. His network was formidable, and now they had just been publicly challenged. Night descended on Atlanta as Talia returned to her cramped safe house apartment on the outskirts of the city. Exhaustion gnawed at her, and she kicked off her shoes, letting her feet sink into the worn carpet. The adrenaline that had fueled her for days was draining fast. Her phone buzzed, and she grabbed it, expecting an update from Teresa. Instead, an unfamiliar number lit up the screen. She hesitated before answering. "Hello," a muffled voice responded. "Agent Morgan, I have information for you, if you still want it." Talia's heart thumped. "Who is this?" There was a pause, and the voice said, "Let's just say I'm close to Mulligan. I've seen what he does, and I was the one who got a call about your meeting behind the bar. I didn't like what went down." A swirl of apprehension and hope gripped Talia. "Where can we meet?" "Not so fast," the caller replied. "You need to promise me full immunity. Mulligan's not the only dirty cop in town. My testimony could get me killed or locked up for a long time. I have a list of judges, lawyers, people on the take." Talia closed her eyes, imagining the scale of corruption. "I'll speak to my superiors, but I can't promise anything until we verify your information. That's how it works." The caller sighed. "Then you'll have to take my word for it, at least for one meeting. Tomorrow, West End Mall parking garage, top level, noon. Come alone or forget it." The line went dead, leaving Talia with nothing but the low hum of her phone. She stood for a moment, processing the call. Had Providence handed them a lifeline, or was this just another trap? The sun was blistering hot the next day as Talia stepped onto the top floor of the West End Mall parking structure. Cars were parked haphazardly in the midday rush, but the upper deck was relatively deserted. She wore casual jeans and a light blouse, trying not to stand out. A small microphone was hidden beneath her collar, and in an SUV several levels below, A DOJ surveillance team monitored every move. Standing near the concrete barrier was a slender figure with dark hair, hidden under a baseball cap. As Talia approached, the figure turned slightly, revealing the unmistakable features of Officer Miguel Reyes, Mulligan's partner. Talia froze in disbelief. "You!" she breathed, eyes narrowing. "You're the one who called me?" Reyes lifted his hands in a non-threatening gesture. "Keep your voice down if you want to live to see tomorrow," he said, his tone low and urgent. "Anyone recognizes us talking, we're both done." Talia scanned the area, adrenaline surging through her once again. "Why should I trust you? You've been working alongside Mulligan for years." Reyes exhaled sharply, looking genuinely tormented. "I didn't know how deep it went at first. Sure, we booked a few easy arrests, wrote questionable reports, but Mulligan always said it was for the good of the department. Then I realized he was taking bribes, setting people up, blackmailing them. I tried to back out. That's when I got threatened." Talia studied his face, searching for any sign of deception. "Threatened how?" Reyes' expression hardened. "Mulligan told me if I ratted him out, he'd pin everything on me, said he had judges in his pocket. I'd be the scapegoat, or worse, I'd end up in a ditch." Talia's mind raced. Reyes was exactly the inside witness they needed, someone who could tie Mulligan's actions to the bigger players involved. But he was also a dirty cop, complicit in numerous crimes. The moral quandary was stark. She needed him, but could she trust him? "If you testify," Talia said carefully, choosing her words, "we can offer some form of deal. I won't lie to you. It won't be a free pass, but if your testimony is solid, you'll be safer with us than on your own." Reyes nodded, grim resignation in his eyes. "I have files, copies of Mulligan's logs, emails that reference payouts, even a few recordings of phone calls with a local judge named Rollins. It's all on a flash drive, hidden at a friend's place. I can get them for you tonight." Talia felt a surge of cautious optimism. Judge Rollins was a name that had circulated in hushed whispers, rumored to be crooked. "All right," she said, her voice steady. "Bring that drive to the DOJ field office. We'll keep you safe." Just then, the screech of tires cut through the tension, making them both jump. A car whipped around the corner onto the top deck, its tinted windows concealing whoever was inside. Talia cursed under her breath. "We need to move." But it was too late. Gunfire erupted from the car's open passenger window. Talia dove behind a nearby vehicle, yanking Reyes down with her. Bullets pinged off the concrete, their sound echoing through the structure. Down below, the DOJ surveillance team would be scrambling to reach them. Talia pressed her phone's emergency button. "Agent down! Parking top floor, shots fired!" she shouted, hoping the microphone would pick up every word. Reyes, breathing heavily, peered over the car hood. "That's Mulligan style, but I can't be sure it's him. We gotta get out of here." The car sped closer, its engine revving. Talia and Reyes sprinted between rows of parked cars, adrenaline fueling every step. Suddenly, the Dodge SUV emerged on the ramp, agents pouring out with guns drawn. The attackers screeched to a halt, reversed, and sped down the ramp. Talia caught a brief glimpse of the license plate. No time to memorize it fully, but maybe enough to help an investigation later. Finally, silence settled over the parking deck. Talia and Reyes slumped against a pillar, hearts pounding. The DOJ agents rushed over, forming a protective circle around them. It had been a near miss, a powerful reminder that Mulligan's network was willing to use lethal force to silence anyone threatening their operation. Later that evening, safe behind the fortified walls of the DOJ field office, Reyes handed over a small flash drive to Talia. "This is everything I've got," he said, his voice trembling with residual fear. Talia, along with Teresa, Regina, and Marcus, immediately loaded the drive onto a secure computer. The contents were explosive, wire transfers from Mulligan to offshore accounts, audio clips in which Mulligan and Judge Rollins discuss arrangements for favorable rulings, plus correspondences linking Mulligan to a city council member with known ties to organized crime. The scale of corruption was beyond anything they had anticipated, a dangerous network that reached farther than they had ever imagined. The scale of the corruption was staggering. "This is a gold mine," Regina whispered, her usual composure shattered. "Judge Rollins is powerful in this district. If he's in on this, who else?" Marcus laid a hand on Talia's shoulder, his voice filled with quiet pride. "You did good, Agent Morgan. Now we have enough to demand an emergency hearing. We can bring Mulligan and Rollins down, maybe even more." The news of the attempted shooting in the parking garage spread like wildfire. Public sentiment, already stirred by Talia's revelation in court, now shifted heavily in favor of the DOJ's investigation. The media painted Mulligan as a rogue officer, and speculation about Judge Rollins' involvement grew. A special evidentiary hearing was fast-tracked, convened under the jurisdiction of a federal judge from outside the Atlanta circuit. Judge Sarah Kendrick, known for her no-nonsense style, was brought in to oversee the case. The courthouse was swarmed with journalists, activists, and curious onlookers. Security was tight, with federal marshals stationed at every exit. Talia felt the weight of countless eyes on her as she stepped into the polished, wood-paneled courtroom. On the prosecution side, Assistant District Attorney Colleen Harris sat, now fully aligned with the DOJ's findings. Mulligan was flanked by 3 attorneys, and Judge Rollins, looking pale and stern, sat a few rows behind them, presumably as an observer. Everyone in the room knew his name was about to be dragged to the mud, yet he still projected an aura of authority, as if daring anyone to challenge him. Judge Kendrick wasted no time. "We are here to determine the merits of corruption charges brought against Officer Brad Mulligan and any co-conspirators. Agent Talia Morgan, you may proceed with your presentation of evidence." Talia took the stand, steadying her nerves. She recounted her undercover operation, the arrest, and the series of events that led to collecting the flash drive. She played audio clips of Mulligan's phone calls, letting the court hear his voice discussing payoffs. The room collectively tensed at the mention of Judge Rollins in those calls. Then Talia introduced Reyes as a witness. Reyes stood, his voice quavering but resolute. He detailed how Mulligan coerced him into planting evidence, forging reports, and tampering with witness statements. Each revelation chipped away at Mulligan's veneer of innocence. Mulligan's lawyers attempted to discredit Reyes, painting him as a cowardly opportunist. But Reyes held firm, tears brimming in his eyes as he confessed his own guilt. "I'm not proud of what I did," he said, his voice cracking. "I'm sorry for everyone we hurt. But Officer Mulligan is the one who orchestrated it all, and we had help from the bench." That was the moment Judge Kendrick's gaze locked onto Judge Rollins. "Judge Rollins," she said, her voice sharp, "please approach the stand." A collective gasp rippled through the courtroom. Rollins had no choice. He walked to front, his posture rigid. Mulligan stared at him with an expression close to panic. If Rollins flipped on him, Mulligan was finished. Under questioning, Rollins feigned ignorance, claiming that any conversation he had with Mulligan was about legitimate judicial affairs. But Talia and Teresa presented records of bank transfers from Mulligan's shell companies to accounts linked to Rollins's family trust. The color drained from Rollins's face, slowly but inexorably, as the entire story unfolded. Mulligan would arrest individuals, often minorities or vulnerable people who couldn't afford top legal defense. With help from certain individuals in the district attorney's office, these offendants would be pressured into plea deals. If they paid large sums, the charges might vanish. If not, they'd face harsh sentences, courtesy of Rollins or other compromised judges. As a final piece of evidence, Talia played a damning phone recording. Mulligan and Rollins discussing a higher-than-normal fee for dropping a case. The room fell into stunned silence. This was a smoking gun, the irrefutable proof that Mulligan's corruption ran deep and that Judge Rollins had been complicit all along against a local businessman's son. The hush that followed was deafening. Judge Rollins' eyes darted around, searching for a lifeline, while Mulligan's face twisted into a storm of hatred, directed at Talia, Reyes, and anyone else who dared to speak out. Judge Kendrick's voice sliced through the tension. "Based on the evidence presented, there is more than sufficient cause to bring formal corruption and conspiracy charges against Officer Mulligan and Judge Rollins. Furthermore, I am ordering an immediate review of all cases overseen by Judge Rollins in the last 10 years, as well as any in which Officer Mulligan played a part." She turned her sharp gaze toward Mulligan's team of lawyers. I suggest you start advising your client to cooperate. A throng of journalists pressed forward, cameras flashing as Mulligan was taken into custody right there in the courtroom. Rollins, once a pillar of authority, was also detained. Talia watched the scene unfold, a tumult of relief, shock, and lingering anger churning within her. The task was far from over. There would be months, if not years, of legal battles, investigations into other officials, and justice for countless victims. But at least the first domino had fallen. Karma rarely knocks loudly. Sometimes it moves like a shadow, silent, deliberate, and final. But for Officer Brad Mulligan, karma didn't just knock. It blew the door clean off its hinges. The courtroom was still echoing with the fallout from the special hearing. The audio recordings of financial trails and Reyes's testimony. Every revelation had cracked the mask Mulligan had worn for years. His one-slick persona, that of a decorated and respected officer, had withered in real time like a portrait left out in the rain. And as federal marshals clamped cold cuffs around his wrists, the smirk he'd worn so proudly, the same one he gave Talia the night he arrested her, vanished without a trace. He looked lost, neither defiant nor angry, just hollow as he was led out of the courthouse through the back entrance, away from a media circus. On the front steps, Mulligan passed by a hallway mirror he'd likely strolled past many times before. But this time, the reflection didn't match the man he used to be. His uniform, once full of honor, now stripped away. His hands shook, and his eyes darted like a trapped animal. There were no reporters, no camera flashes, just the truth staring back at him. He had once built his world on lies, rigged arrests, planted evidence, coerced confessions. But every lie was a brick, and he had built himself a prison, one deception at a time. And now he was locked inside it. The charges came like a torrent. Felony corruption, perjury, evidence tampering, abuse of authority, conspiracy to commit judicial fraud, and attempted murder in connection with the ambush at the West End Mall. Federal investigators linked him to over 77 tainted arrests and 24 plea deals, pressured under threat or blackmail. Some of his victims had spent years behind bars. Others had lost jobs, families, and futures. One name stood out: Lamar Easton, a straight-A college student whose life was upended after a planted cocaine charge. He never graduated and took his own life 2 years into a sentence he never should have served. When Lamar's mother heard Mulligan was finally arrested, she showed up to the courthouse. She didn't shout. She didn't cry. She simply stood in the corridor outside the courtroom, clutching Lamar's graduation photo to her chest, whispering, "You don't get to smirk now." The image of her face, silent, strong, and broken, stayed with every officer and official who passed her. But karma wasn't done yet, because behind Mulligan stood a larger beast, the system that had enabled him. Judge Leonard Rollins, who had once slammed his gavel with the force of God, now found himself in front of it. Federal agents raided his home at dawn, a Grand Victorian in Buckhead. He emerged in silk pajamas, his face pale, escorted into blinding blue and red swirl of police lights. The neighborhood watched from their windows. He didn't speak, didn't protest, just silently followed. He didn't shout about his innocence. Instead, he simply hung his head. Documents found in his study detailed years of payoffs through fake legal retainers and expedited court fees, offshore accounts in Belize, and phone logs connecting him to defense attorneys who routinely lost evidence. Judge Rollins had betrayed the very bench he had sworn to uphold. The Department of Justice, with Talia's meticulous groundwork and Teresa and Juan's data tracing, had now brought down 5 more individuals tied to the web. 2 prosecutors, a city councilman, and even a clerk who had been quietly altering court records for a price. Atlanta was rattled. The city's faith in its institutions cracked, and years of corruption now lay in rubble. But amidst the anger, something remarkable happened. People started awakening. Families who had once been too afraid to speak up came forward. Community leaders, once discouraged by the silence of justice, now stood in front of microphones. News vans lined the streets like streetlights, and the conversation shifted from fear to reckoning. The Atlanta Journal-Constitution ran a full-page, front-cover headline, "Unmasked, Justice Finally Served." Below it was a photo of Talia walking out courthouse, not in cuffs this time, but in full DOJ attire, badge visible, head held high. Back inside federal holding, Mulligan waited for trial. His cell was small, sterile, and unchanging. The buzz of fluorescent lights above him offered no comfort. No sirens to hide behind, no smirks, no power. There were rumors he might flip, give names, cut deals. But the DOJ had learned one thing. Bullies don't bend under pressure, they break. And Mulligan broke in silence. The footage of his interrogation would later be used in training seminars on corruption, a once proud officer slowly unraveling under the weight of his own deceit. His sentencing was swift and merciless. Life in prison, no parole. Not for the drugs, not even for the bribes, but for the pattern of destruction he had left in his wake, and the countless lives shattered in his rise to power. He appealed, of course, but each request was denied with a single line: justice has been served. For Reyes, the former partner turned whistleblower, redemption didn't come free. He was sentenced to 10 years, with the possibility of early parole under witness protection. His testimony, while invaluable, couldn't erase the crimes he committed. He accepted the verdict with tears in his eyes and a letter in his pocket, handwritten by Talia, thanking him for finally stepping out of the shadows. As for Judge Rollins, he took a plea deal, disbarred, disgraced, and facing 25 years in federal prison. He would spend the rest of his days in a cell smaller than his former chambers, ironically, just down the hall from the very people he once sentenced with disdain. A cruel, poetic twist of fate. But karma didn't just bring down the corrupt. It lifted up the brave. Talia Morgan became a name whispered in classrooms, police stations, and law schools across the country. The agent who played defendant. The woman who flipped the courtroom. The undercover force who walked into a trap and walked out with the entire system in her hand. The following year, she was awarded the Presidential Medal of Valor for law enforcement. She didn't want a ceremony, but she attended for one reason. Lamar Easton's mother, who was seated in the front row, holding her son's photo. As Talia stood at the podium, she said, "This isn't about me. This is about the ones who didn't get to walk out of courtrooms, the ones silenced, forgotten. This medal belongs to them." The room rose in applause, and so did a nation. Weeks turned to months. Trials were prepared, and Talia testified in several of them. Each time she took the stand, she felt a mix of pride and sorrow. Pride that justice was finally within reach, and sorrow for the countless lives ruined by Mulligan and his ilk. She remembered the families of those wrongly convicted, the tears of mothers who lost their children to a flawed system. At least now, the tide was turning. One evening, Talia received an email from Talia's phone buzzed with an address she didn't recognize. When she opened the message, it contained a single line: "Thank you for trying to help me behind the blue orchid. I'm safe now. Keep fighting." It was unsigned, but Talia knew exactly who it was. The first anonymous informant, the person who had risked everything to blow the whistle before being attacked. They had survived, a small triumph in this chaotic chapter. At the DOJ's recommendation, Talia was offered promotion, the chance to lead a new task force dedicated to rooting out corruption in law enforcement agencies nationwide. She accepted. Her mission had evolved from just a job into a calling, one she was determined to pursue with unwavering dedication. On the day she left Atlanta, Talia stood once more on the steps of the Fulton County Courthouse, the same building that had nearly swallowed her whole as a defendant. Now it stood behind her, a symbol of a justice system that could be bent but not entirely broken. She raised her chin, letting the warm Georgia breeze carry away the weight of her undercover persona. She was ready for the next battle, wherever it might be, and somewhere in a high-security cell, Officer Mulligan sat alone. His arrogance had been replaced by desperation. The walls he once wielded to imprison others now closed in on him. He had no allies left, only the hollow echo of his own regrets, reminding him every day that karma had finally come for him. And so ends the turbulent saga of Talia Morgan, an undercover DOJ agent who boldly stepped into a defendant's shoes to expose one of Atlanta's dirtiest secrets. From the moment Officer Mulligan's smirk met Talia's determined stare in the courthouse, every power play and betrayal led to an explosive unveiling of corruption. Now, Mulligan faces the same charges he once doled out so carelessly, and the judicial system, rocked to its core, has a chance to rebuild. Talia's triumph is more than just a personal victory. It is a beacon of hope, showing that even in the darkest corridors of power, justice can find a way. If this story gripped your heart and kept you on the edge of your seat, make sure to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Join us for more stories that celebrate the pursuit of truth and the incredible people who risk everything to see justice served. Your support helps us shine a light where others would keep us in the dark. Thank you for watching.